Welcome to Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, the podcast that gives you an unfiltered, behind-the-scenes look at what it's really like being a woman in the middle who's over 50 and following her entrepreneurial dreams. Grab a superhero cape, girlfriend, because you deserve one. I'm your host, Master Certified Life Coach and Midlife Mentor, Suzy Rosenstein, and I am excited to inspire you with interviews that feature all of this midlife amazingness. Let's go. Hey there, welcome back to the show. We have a really exciting interview ahead of us about a seasoned entrepreneur who believes that every day is a chance to do better than the day before. Today, you'll be meeting Mary Brotherton, a woman in the middle entrepreneur who's an author and also the founder of bUneke, a not-for-profit educational organization that promotes other charities, philanthropic businesses, and regular folks who are working today to change tomorrow. Welcome to the show, Mary. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Suzy. I'm delighted to be here.
I know we're going to have a great conversation about your midlife entrepreneur story. We'll be talking about your business, about what's going really well, and also what midlife issues might be getting in your way just a little bit to some extent and are challenging you in your life as well as being a business owner. So let's start off with my favorite questions. How old are you? How long have you been an entrepreneur? And what is going on in your business? Like, what do you do? What's your entrepreneurial journey? And just what do you do out there in the world? Take it away.
I am 68, but I say that I'm celebrating the encore of my 18th birthday this year.
I love that.
When I turned 50, my husband could not believe it. He said, "You just aren't 50. So I asked him how old I should be. He said 35. So since then, I've been celebrating encores. I give him a 9 2 or 3 times. So it just depends. But I am 68 years old.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And I love your attitude about celebration.
It is a celebration. Every day is an opportunity to celebrate and a chance to do something good in the world. When I was 62, I formulated bUneke, which is a not-for-profit organization. We've been working with a lot of volunteers around the world for the last 5 years. We do a magazine. It comes in print, audio, and a digital format. We have a very active blog. We have, oh my gosh, so much stuff going on. We do an event called MetaFest every 3 months where we bring like-minded people together for a public free event. And we have documentaries which have won international awards. And we have a podcast, we call it a radio show because we have 14 different hosts on it.
Wow.
4 of them are producing right now. The others are in archives or they may come back later. 3 of those shows are mine. So that's kind of crazy. I do that. And that's my fun not for profit charitable stuff. Since I am an entrepreneur, let me back up for a second. I get ahead of myself. And as my father would say, my tongue gets wrapped around my eye teeth and I can't see what I'm saying.
But it is an entrepreneurial issue to be so excited and energized about so many things. I totally get it.
And my sister asked me when I told her I was going to start a nonprofit or a charity, she said, "How in the world are you going to get paid?" I said, "Don't worry about it." But it is a business just like any other business. We promote people like a marketing business. We share ideas and we are mentoring high schoolers, college students, and older adults who want to learn to write or want to learn how to be in the film business. And we work with them as if we were a 6-figure organization, like we were all earning the big bucks. We donate our time, which I'm fortunate that I have a husband who supports me because the other part of my entrepreneurship is I'm an author and I'm a new-ish author. I've been writing all my life. I feel like I've been an entrepreneur at least for the last 25, 30 years. Until even before then, I think I was doing it, but not realizing that's what I was doing. Because I always had some little side hustle going on. 40 years ago, I started writing a book that I knew was going to be called, I didn't know the name at that time. After a while, I knew the name was going to be called Go With Angels. And it's a book of memoirs. It's a book of true stories based on my life, my experiences, my children's instances with near-death experiences. And that book took me 40 years to write until another self-published author just challenged me by saying, "You're scared." Well, y'all, I'm not afraid of nothing. And I wasn't going to let anybody tell me that I was. So all I could think of was, I ain't afraid of no ghosts. So whatever my ghosts were that were holding me back, I published that book. Then within the last 4 months, I wrote another book for children called My Angel Book. And that was purely inspired by who knows what, but it wasn't something that I thought of doing. And I've got 20 other books, or 18 or so, whatever, in that general ballpark, 20 or so books of different genres that I've been working on that I've just been hesitating to get out there and publish. And I kept thinking one day I'm going to have somebody pick this up, but nobody will pick you up if you don't put yourself out there.
That's true.
If you don't market yourself when the doors are being slammed in your face. And that happened to me with another book that I was trying to promote and trying to get the attention of agents and publishers and editors and whatnot. Over 200 rejections. And I know the book is a good book. I just didn't know how to get it to that point of, there you go, people. Now, my children's book already has more than 40 pre-orders. The book's not even finished yet. Well, the book is finished. The book's not in my hands. I have my proof copy, but I do not have the copies to distribute. So I decided when I got all those rejections that I needed to say, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a good writer. I know I'm a good writer. I know my stuff. I don't need you. And stop doing it the way everybody else used to do it. So I waited a few more years before I got challenged. And then I published the first book, and the second book is coming out very soon. Have another idea for another book that popped into my head. I will eventually get to all my other. I have 2 novels, at least 5 children's books, several anthologies. I have a couple of books of poetry that I want to compile. They're all related to grief, oddly enough. So I'll make that into like one of those gift books that you might pick up when you want to give someone who's grieving a copy of something inspirational.
And why is that topic so important to you?
Because it got me through my first marriage and my first divorce. My method of writing at that point in time was poetry. So I kept writing and writing and writing, and I didn't realize that they were all kind of dealing with loss. And a lot of loss isn't necessarily due to death. And that was something I had to understand. And as women, I think we lose so much of ourselves before we hit our midlife point.
Yes.
We give ourselves away too freely to other people who may or may not deserve it, but we forget that we deserve it too. And that, I think, is what led to creating bUneke, because I sat down with one of my co-founders. One day we were just both very angry with the world, and we were determined to do something to get that anger out and turn it into something productive. So we decided, since we had both been in the business, she is a graphic designer, and I've always been a writer and an editor. So we decided that instead of helping other people look good doing that, we would make ourselves look good. And that's what we've been doing. We've been not winning a lot of awards for the magazine because we haven't been putting it out there yet. And that's one thing that I would highly encourage entrepreneurs to do is, if you've got something that you are thinking about doing, stop thinking about it and just take that leap of faith and jump and do it. The worst that can happen is you fail, and then you can pick yourself up and start all over again.
Well, there was something in your note that I wanted to ask you about regarding the books, and it's that you used AI to illustrate. Tell us how that went.
I did. The whole book I created with artificial intelligence because, like I said, this book was it was inspired. I was talking to my niece about my first book, which is called Go with Angel. It literally is true stories about angelic. I call it angels and others because I talk to dead people and they talk back sometimes. I'm not what you would call psychic, but I do receive messages that way sometimes. I can't sit here and say, "Oh, Suzy, your grandmother's behind you and she wants me to tell you that you look marvelous today," or "keep it up." That's not the kind of messages I receive. But when I was talking to my niece, she ordered a second copy of the first book for her 3-year-old granddaughter because the granddaughter kept taking the book from grandma. And she said, I like my angel book and I love the angel. And so when I was getting ready to send her the second copy, she asked me what else I was going to write. And I explained about the 20 some odd books that I've got. And she said, why don't you just put them in alphabetical order and write them that way? And I said, that's a great idea. And I heard a voice that I know as Gus. I call that God, universe, spirit, and source. And I don't care if you call it Lulu. Everybody has a higher power that most everybody believes in a higher power, wherever it is or whatever you call it. So that entity spoke to me and said, I want you to write your next book about angels for children. And I'm like, yes, I can do this because I've written other children's books and they're pretty simple for me, but they're not always so simple. I sat down and I sat down. I tried writing with my typewriter, which is my choice of typing or writing. I tried to write it by longhand. I tried dictating it. I got 8 unbelievably, ridiculously lousy lines for the book. And I said, this is not going to work. So I took myself into meditation and I said, okay, Gus, you said you wanted me to write a book about angels for children. Why can't I come up with any lines that make any sense? Clear as day, I heard, paint the pictures and the words will come. So grabbed me some canvases that I actually had lying around the house, got some more paints and some brushes, and I started painting. And about halfway through, I said, okay, you told me to paint, but I am not a painter. This is not working because they looked pretty elementary. And he said, Michelangelo told me that once too. I'm like, holy moly, I've never been compared to Michelangelo. He said, keep at it. So I kept at it. This was the beginning of November. By Christmas Day, I had maybe painted 11 or 12 pictures, and I still didn't think they were very nice. But my son called me for Christmas. We started talking, and I told him the same. I got him up to speed where you are right now. And then I started texting him pictures of these paintings that I had done. And he said, Mom, have you ever thought about using AI to paint your pictures? I said, I've never thought about it because I didn't know that was something I could do. And he said, yeah, anybody can do it. And he told me about a program called Midjourney, which is part of another program called Discord. And Discord is something that gamers typically use to talk to each other. And I had Discord already installed on my laptop and on my other computer. And so I said, well, I'll go try it. And I tried it. And the next thing I know, I'm painting these amazing pictures. And when I finished, I really still had no idea what I was going to write, but I just started making up ideas. Like I might say a family of people around a dinner table with an angel, or a little girl smiling and laughing, or I might say butterflies, paint me a picture of butterflies. I just did whatever came to mind. And when I finished, all of a sudden, these words just started flowing out of me. And I created this book. Within 40 days of the idea, I had the book at the printer's house.
Well, I have to say, Mary, this is really interesting for a few reasons. One is because so many women in midlife complain about technology. So I've heard this. It's a very common theme in this podcast. And of course, I've been in this business now.
I love technology.
For almost 10 years. Yeah. But not like for some people, it really, like, I wouldn't say I hate technology, but I do notice that I have some preconceived notions about how difficult it's going to be. And so how old was your grandson that told you about this?
My son is.
Oh, it was your son?
My son. He's 40. I have to stop and count. He's 42.
Okay. So he was using this technology. Has he done the illustration before?
He has done it. Yes. He's a big time gamer. So he does this for his games.
Okay. So I just think it's really cool that somebody younger gave you a quick little insight to what was possible, and you gave it a try, and it turned into the thing that gave you a breakthrough. But what all started it was the drawing. So you had drawings to share or paintings to share, and it started the conversation. That was really cool. So as you know, the point of this podcast is to really look at that special, unique intersection between midlife challenges and trying to run your business. Because a lot of times midlife challenges are a little bit unpredictable. So can you tell me a little bit about how that has come up for you. I know one thing you mentioned is, being pressed for time when it comes to visiting your family, including your grandchildren, because,
Yeah.
you have a lot of projects on the go. So tell me about how that works out for you.
Well, it's interesting because it segues into technology. My grandson he's 17. He lives in California with his mother. Both of my sons live in Florida, but they're 3 hours away from me. So it's not easy between their schedules and my schedule to get together frequently.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we use Zoom or FaceTime or texting. My youngest son, the one who told me about the AI, he has a rule. He calls it the 3 text rule. If I text you and you text me 3 times each, it's time for a phone call.
I love that. I really love that. That's really good. Okay. The other thing you mentioned is where's the time to exercise? So we all know how important self-care is. We all know how important movement is and to, mobility and all of those things. So how is that showing up for you? What are your thoughts? What are your challenges?
Well, it's interesting because I started exercising more, started walking daily. I think we're on week 6 now because I crashed someone's retirement party.
What do you mean?
Well, my husband used to work with a woman and he came home from work one day. He said, remember I told you about Barbara who lives in our neighborhood that you've never met for the last 7 years because we both work all the time? I'm like, yeah. He said, she's retiring. I said, yeah, you told me that a while back that she was going to retire soon. He said, no, she's retiring today. She's done. And they're having a party for her over at so-and-so restaurant. And I'm going. I said, okay, see you later. He said, no, you don't understand. I wasn't invited to her party. I just overheard it. So I'm crashing her party and I need you to crash it with me because wherever you go, people just look at you and go, oh, it's just that crazy woman with the weird hair. So who cares? So we sat there and we were just one chair away from the honoree. And I met her and I shook her hand. I said, nice to meet you. Now I know what you look like. You're my neighbor, but I've never had the time or we've never made the time to meet. She's like a street and a half over. So I noticed that she was wearing an amethyst bracelet, as was I. So I held up my arm and I said, oh, I love your bracelet. And that started a little conversation, but it was just centered around that one topic. And then we didn't talk anymore because must have been 50 people there to wish her goodbye. And at the end of the evening, she came over and was standing right behind me and talking to a group of other people. And you know how everybody says, oh, you won the Super Bowl. What are you going to do next? Well, I'm going to so-and-so. I'm not going to advertise for anybody, but, they said, well, Barbara, now that you've retired, what are you going to do next? And she said, oh, I don't know. I think maybe I'll start a walking routine. Now, Barbara's about my age. She's probably in her late 60s and she's on the heavy side like I am. And I just immediately shot my hand up in the air. I said, oh, do you want a partner? I'll go walking with you. And literally, I thought that I don't know where this came from. Why did I say that? And then as soon as I said it, I thought, oh, I don't have time to go walking. And she's retired. She's not going to have anything to do. And I'm still very, very busy. So she said, okay, well, I'll let you know. That was kind of the way it ended. I'm like, whew, I don't have walking yet.
Yeah.
And maybe a week later, she texted me and she said, hey, do you want to start walking? I said, I do. She said, can we start tomorrow? I'm like, oh, yeah. How can I offer somebody something and then not? So as we started walking over these last 6 weeks, we've become very good friends. And she confided in me one day. She said, I don't know why I said I wanted to start walking. I had no intention of doing that. I just said that to shut them up. And I said, and I don't know why I offered to be your walking partner because I don't have time for that. And she laughed because she knows how busy I am. And we schedule our walks every morning, basically around my schedule.
Sure. That sounds great.
And around our upcoming doctor's appointments, things of that nature.
So, I mean, it's classic to have an excuse, the I'm too busy excuse.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We all know that we find time to do all kinds of things that we prioritize.
Whatever we want to do, we find time for.
Absolutely. So that's great. Now, another thing that you mentioned is that you struggle to delegate. So why do you think you struggle to delegate?
Not as much now as when I actually wrote that, because I've had a lot more dumped on my plate. Because one of my colleagues, well, the one that I mentioned that we went to dinner and discussed, let's do this. She's actually on the West Coast now dealing with her son who's just had brain tumor removed. So a lot of things have been dumped on my lap. So I'm ready to dump them back out. But I think the reason most entrepreneurs don't delegate is because we have a tendency to think nobody can do it as well as I can. Nobody will get it like I get it. And what if they mess up? And so actually, I literally got in my house 5 minutes before the show started. I was praying all the way. I had to drive from Orlando, which is an hour away from where I live. And I was praying all the way for green lights, all the way, smooth traffic, no cops. That was my mantra. Green lights, smooth traffic, no cops. And I literally got at my desk, turned it on 5 minutes before it was time to start the show. And that was because I went to my friend's house to pick up things for this MetaFest event that we're going to be having later this month, because she's currently out there. And then her husband's going to be joining her and their son, and they're acting as his in-home caregivers. He was released from ICU to go home because they had no room in the hospital to take care of him.
Okay, I know that stuff like that definitely happens. I'm so sorry to hear that.
It does. And I started a GoFundMe for them 2 days ago, and it already achieved its first goal. So I'm very grateful for all of the donors.
But it really brings up, the problem of the unpredictability of health. So a lot of times it's not your health, although it could be, but it's people that you love. It's people that you know, it's people that you care about. And you're right. I mean, a lot of times you do what you can. And that also affects your ability to focus on your own priorities. Now, there was one more thing, though, that I wanted to touch on, because we're kind of talking about this being sedentary. And so many of us entrepreneurs are sedentary. And you mentioned that you bought a standing desk.
I did.
Now, is it working? Do you find it useful?
Yes, because sometimes when you sit, especially as we get older, you sit long enough and your feet will go to sleep. Or this part that touches the chair will go to sleep, or you start getting cramps in your body. And so when that happens, I just push a button and I stand up, and everything on my desktop rises with me. So I don't have to worry about adjusting the monitor, or if I'm doing a podcast. And sometimes I do the podcast standing, depending on whether it's going to be a short one or a long one.
Yeah.
But it's easy for me to think when I'm on my butt, unfortunately. But there are times that I will, depending on what I'm doing, I'll just raise that desk up high. And sometimes I'll just crank up the music and dance for a minute just to get the blood flowing again.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad. I haven't talked to too many people who have those standing desks. And there are so many of us entrepreneurs who are sitting a lot. Now, the other thing that you mentioned,
have cramps in our neck.
Totally. The hunching and the leaning. Yeah. No, you're right.
I would highly recommend, if you can't get or don't want or can't afford a standing desk, get a way to elevate your monitor so that you're not looking down at it. Mm-hmm. That's the key, is having that monitor right at your face so that you can, be more efficient. It's made a big difference in my efficiency.
Oh, that's so good. And, the other thing that you mentioned, so many entrepreneurs do work at home. Now, not everyone. Some people have chosen not to work at home. But you said a side effect of working at home that I found really interesting. And it's really about space, the final frontier, as I always like to say. You said that you're storing a lot of stuff. And so many of us don't have the best situation for storage, depending on the layout of the house, depending on how many other people are working at home for some of us. So you said you've got a lot of boxes of books and you don't have a physical address for the charity. Sometimes it can become confusing and messy, especially when there's special promotions going on. So how are you dealing with that? Have you had to try to claim parts of the house or invest in new storage?
Investing in new storage is going to be the next option. But I'm very fortunate. When we bought this house, it came with a bonus room, which had been used as a mother-in-law suite prior to us. And it's right next to my office. A lot of people laughed at us. But Curtis and I have no children at home. He has one son. I have my two. We met later in my life. And when we bought this house, it came with like 4 bedrooms plus the 2 bonus rooms. And the realtor said, "What are you going to do with all this space?" I said, "Oh, trust me, we've got it all planned out." And that was even before I started bUneke. I thought it was going to be a party house, actually, but that never happened. But I have one room that is dedicated for the bUneke stuff and the overflow of my books. Unfortunately, the guest room isn't used as often as I'd like for it to be for guests, but it's kind of become an additional storage space.
Mm-hmm.
But if in an ideal world, bUneke will have its own front, storage front at some point. And
that's cool.
Yeah, that would be really nice to have a place.
I've definitely heard people sometimes they start outside the home, and then for a variety of reasons they come inside the home, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't work. But I've seen such flow now with COVID kind of changing the landscape of working at home. And even my kids who are in their 20s, it's very common for them to either work at home full time or work at home part time because
my husband does that.
Yeah, the way that the other employers are working their businesses. So there are just more people at home, and it doesn't always serve the person who was there first.
Exactly. And I will say that it sometimes it can muddy the waters.
Yeah.
In a woman's mind, especially because women can't compartmentalize like men do. Most women, I will say.
It's very hard not to wipe a counter on the way to the kitchen, in the kitchen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard to not be doing everything at once. And so I'm grateful to have an office that's dedicated for the charity and my writing. But there are times that I get really confused about which one I should be doing. And I know a lot of entrepreneurial women do manage more than one business.
Yeah, I've certainly seen that here on the podcast too. So one of the things you wrote about in your application to be on the show was that you are 100% free to create the life that you want and about 90% free to create the business that you want. So what is standing in your way?
With the life I want, nothing, obviously. I'm 100% free to do that. I am, like I said, I'm very graced to have a husband who supports me 100% and can't wait to see me get my next book out. He is all about my writing. As far as the business, the biggest thing that's standing in the charities way is funding, financing. I'm still 5 years into this, still a volunteer. We haven't hit that threshold yet where we can say it's time to hire. I mean, I've been acting as the executive director for 5 years without a penny, but it's fortunate that I love what I do.
Yes. So working on some of the succession planning for that and blending it with the income producing things that you're doing.
That's my next goal, is to create a succession plan. And I in an ideal world, I would love to be able to hand over the keys to the bUneke kingdom to someone who's got a little more youth to them than I do, than just completely focus on my writing. That's what I want to do.
That sounds like a great plan in quotes. a great dream at this point. And there's nothing wrong with a dream to drive.
But I'm pretty good at manifesting the things that I want to manifest.
Yeah. And to drive in that direction. Yeah. So you say you've either been self-employed or a freelancer, which is really another word for being entrepreneurial, for 18 years. So certainly you have a lot of experience doing that. And now adding the not-for-profit business as you have to everything that you're doing, it's a lot of juggling. So what would you say the most surprising thing is for you now about being a woman who's in her late 60s and juggling all of this entrepreneurial stuff, not-for-profit and for-profit, and of course, writing? What do you think is the most surprising thing about being at this age and stage?
That I haven't collapsed on the couch.
You did mention energy earlier on in your notes. You haven't talked about it yet, but sometimes there is a physicality and a physical effect of all of this brain power and running around that you're doing.
Well, I've had my medical issues in the past, and I feel like I'm on the path now toward recovery, I guess you could say. And a lot of the issues dealt with the actual stress of life. And when I started focusing, believe it or not, more on my writing and saying, okay, I've been giving and giving and giving and giving, whether it was to my family or friends or this charity, that's still constantly pouring it out. When I started working on what fulfills me and creating all these new books and these more ideas are coming and more energy has followed. And I'm going, I'm crashing retirement parties saying, I'll be your new partner. I'll go wherever you go.
Yeah.
I find myself opening up to things that I never thought that I would.
Oh, I love that. I love that because you're being exposed to so much and you're responding.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you're really out there. That's great.
I think that's another reason that I celebrate encore birthdays of the younger years. I'm not going to ever say I'm 29 and holding or 21 again. I just have an encore and I change it up every year. But I think that is what keeps me able to keep going. I don't ever want to be an old lady who just sits down with a crossword puzzle, because that's definitely what I would do when I can't do anything else.
Yeah. Well, there's one other thing that I did want to ask you about, and it's interesting because you addressed it a little bit when you raised your hand to walk with your neighbor, but you said something that is very, very common for midlife women, especially busy, successful midlife women like entrepreneurs. And that is this disconnect with other women and relationships that you have who are gearing down when you're gearing up in energy and excitement and trying new things. And there's a disconnect there. And it means that you're unavailable for socializing sometimes. It means that relationships change and in some cases diminish. So what are you experiencing when it comes to friends and hanging out together?
That's a great question. Because I've had 3 people this past week say, when can we do lunch? The majority of my friends, unbelievably, I don't know why it's unbelievable. They're more my husband's age, and he's 15 years younger than I am. And they don't always have the liberty to come and go. But most of my friends tend to be entrepreneurial too. I don't know if that's just because that's what I attract into my life, but that makes it more difficult and yet easier to plan lunches and things because you have more flexible schedules most of the time. Not every entrepreneur does. A lot of women stick and whatever their working is, but some people do like to stick to that 9 to 5 schedule because it makes them feel more comfortable. Not me. I have learned in this past year alone to listen to what my body needs. And I think that is really important, especially as we do start looking at that 70 age. That doesn't mean it's time to stop or slow down. It means we need to look at it a little differently. And for me, that means make sure you're taking care of yourself first. Take your own oxygen or put on your own life vest before you try to help somebody else.
Yeah. So what does that mean for you? Is it sleep? Is it water, diet, exercise?
Yes, and yes.
All yes.
All 3 yeses.
But what are you really working on? Is there one of those 3? Like I'm really working on water right now. And I know sleep is my next thing. I need to definitely increase the hours of sleep.
I work on all of them together, but the way I sleep is more like the indigenous people would do. They sleep when they're tired or like a baby. If I'm hungry, I'm going to eat something. It may not be a big meal, but I am also not, my house no longer has the things that I'm not allowed to eat.
And what is that?
Sugar, wheat, any grains. I don't do any grains. I'm basically a meat eating vegan. It's weird, but I eat a lot of vegetables and I still eat meat. I don't eat any grains. I'm eating more sprouted foods.
Are you feeling better?
I'm feeling 1,000% better.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I drink water when I'm thirsty.
I love that you're focusing on really listening to your body.
That's the key.
Yeah, that is such an important message, is to stay connected to not just your emotions, but your physical self, because when you're busy, it's very easy to just ignore all of that.
Well, how many mothers and grandmothers out there pay such close attention to their children and grandchildren, and we watch them for any little sign of discomfort, and we're right there to help them. Who's there to help us? Nobody.
That's right.
And my mother passed away in 2014, so I don't even have my mother to call when I'm having a bad day. I can't call her on the phone and say, "Hey, Mom, I need to talk to you." Yeah. So I have to be my own mother now.
Yeah, and that's self-care.
I am my biggest advocate, and I know that a lot of women struggle with self-love, and a lot of us have been taught that it's vanity or it's ego, and we should not focus on ourselves. But if we don't, who will? And do not say your spouse, because they will not always be there for you. There's nobody in this world that's going to always be there for you but you.
I completely agree. And that is a great note to ask you my last question, which is, how can people best get in touch with you?
That's pretty easy. Find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I even have a YouTube channel, but bUneke is the easiest way because I have weird names for all my other channels. I'm either Mary Brotherton or bUneke editor. My most recent one is Angel Author, and that's the Facebook page I'm using for my books.
Okay, can you spell bUneke one more time, because it is an unusual spelling? Go ahead.
bUneke.
Amazing.
My husband thought I had made an error. He said, "You never misspell words." I said, "It's not a misspelled words. It spells bUneke." And if you look at the word, the logo, the U is bigger than anything else. There's a lowercase b and a capital U, and everything else is lowercase. And that's because it's all about you, Suzy. It's about us. It's about the universe. And we want people to be unique, be authentic, be genuine, be yourself. And those are the kinds of peoples that we talk about and that we promote in our organization, either through films, podcast, or the magazine. We have promoted more than 3,000 individuals and charities and even for-profit that are philanthropic minded since, in the last 5 years.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. All right, Mary, thank you so much for joining us today.
Welcome.
And for taking the time, because I know you are busy and I know your friend is waiting for you to walk. I really appreciate how much you support other professionals who help the world become a better place, and that you had enough nerve to try some cool technology to help you move those books forward. That's really cool. I love what you're doing. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. That's it for now. If you're listening and loving what you hear, please like and subscribe. Reviews are great too and much appreciated. And if you're a woman in the middle who's 50 or over and an entrepreneur and would like to come on the show, please go to www.midlifeinterviews.com and fill out an application. We'd love to have you on to share your story. Thanks so much for listening. It's never too late for you to put yourself on your agenda. I'm Suzy Rosenstein, and I'll talk to you again soon. Now, real quick before we say goodbye, if you are connecting with this show, I'd love to invite you to a happiness breakthrough coaching session. It's my laser-focused coaching call that will help you get clear about what's getting in your way as a woman in the middle entrepreneur and confident about your next steps to more happiness in your next chapter. Head over to www.nextchapterbreakthrough.com. Talk to you soon.